Welcome to today's webinar on the pilot collaboration between the SNSF and ChronosHub. My name is Claudia Lautenschütz. I was responsible for setting up this pilot at the SNSF. I'm here together with my colleague Tobias Philipp from the strategy department at the SNSF. He masters all the OA related questions. And I'm also here with Martin Jägerhorn from ChronosHub, who will talk you through the services that we are offering within this pilot and that are meant to simplify the publication experience for you. We have expected roughly 100 researchers today and about 20 representatives from libraries present in this webinar. The focus of the webinar will really be on making you familiar with the core services of ChronosHub that are offered to authors. And you're welcome to ask your questions via the chat function already during the presentation, but of course also afterwards. There will be enough time for questions and answers after the presentation session. Maybe you've seen it already, but I would like to inform you once again that this webinar will be recorded so that we can also make it available to people who didn't make it to today's webinar. It will presumably be made available on SNSF's environment in ChronosHub. So once again, welcome to today's webinar, and I would like to hand over to Martin Jägerhorn for the presentation of the services.
Thank you for the introduction, Claudia, and good morning also from my side. It's a pleasure to be here and great to see such an interest from so many. We'll walk you through first a little bit just a context and an overview of ChronosHub for you to understand a little bit where we're coming from and the context. And then we'll go into a few slides just giving you an overview of the scope of the pilot and how we're working together. And then, of course, a live demonstration, a walkthrough, so that you get familiar with the environment and the system that all of you should have received access to. And with all of you, I mean all SNSF grantees, so that you can use the system already from now on to report back on any publications that you have and get publishing fees paid for and ensuring compliance and so forth. By starting over here, yeah, and I also just want to mention that you can of course also ask questions at any time in the chat, as Claudia said, and please feel free to ask questions in English, German, or French. And then we'll simply see what language that fits most when we answer them. All right, so we'll dive in here. So first of all, ChronosHub is the name both on the company and the platform. So ChronosHub is a Danish-based company in Copenhagen. And the platform is, I think it's fair to say, it's the leading open access management system today for optimizing research publishing and reporting processes. And we work already with quite a number of different funders, so not only the SNSF, but also directly with institutions and library consortia and different publishers. Also here one in Switzerland, by the way. Yeah, and it's quite interesting to work with all these different stakeholders, and you as researchers, of course, as our primary sort of group of stakeholders, because we all share a lot of common challenges. So when we look at open access today, it's of course important and great to bring all these research results into a public domain and making it accessible for everyone worldwide. But it also leads to a lot of different challenges that I'm sure you're familiar with in many ways. But just to bring that kind of context into the picture so that you understand a little bit what ChronosHub serves to do and how we're working together with the different stakeholders to solve these challenges. So SNSF and a lot of other funders have more and more complex policies in a way, and that drive, of course, publishing preferences to a certain extent. And we know that this makes it quite difficult for you as authors and researchers to know for certain where you can get published in a way that is compliant now with these evolving policies. And they are really not so easy to understand always. These policies also drive publishers to develop new business models, because publishers, they need to see that they're also financially sustainable. And there are today about 28 different open access business models out there. So you may have heard of models like gold open access and green open access and hybrid and subscribe to open, but there are really a lot of different mechanisms like vouchers and waivers and discounts and read and publish agreements and publish and read agreements and so forth involved. And that makes it complicated not only for you, but of course for funders that need to see, are you eligible to be paid for getting published here or not? And also for your institutions. And that's also why it's great to see that some librarians have joined us also for today's webinar. Because on institutional level, this means, of course, also quite time-consuming processes, checking articles very much manually to do approvals or different kinds of checks and payments. But from our perspective, the worst situation is really for you as researchers, because you need to do all these things manually today. When you submit to publishers, well, you have to fill in, as you know, very, very extensive submission forms. And then SNSF and other funders want you to report back, very often manually, the same information again. What are the outputs of your grants? And then your institution wants you to populate their local repositories. Again, the same information, and to a large extent manually. So today there are a lot of systems involved, but they're all working quite a lot in isolation, or siloed systems. And this makes the communication here quite difficult between the different parties. So that's what we really try to achieve and solve: facilitate the communication between all these 4 stakeholder groups. And the only way how to do that is to really integrate a lot with a lot of different systems. And so the starting point for ChronosHub and what we do is that we collect data from publishers on their journals so that we can match that up with the funders' policies. This means that you as an author, you have the possibility to go into ChronosHub. So now today we'll have a look at, of course, the SNSF environment on ChronosHub that you all have access to. And so here you will be able to see, for a little bit more than currently 45,000 journals, based on SNSF's policy, which ones of these journals that offer a compliant route. In addition to that, we also have a number of institutions with agreements with the publishers, and they are also quite tricky for you to know about, of course, in detail. So we have integrated, for the moment, 3 of those national deals. So if you belong to an institution that has opted into any of those national deals with Elsevier, Wiley, or Springer Nature, you will also see that in the journal finder here, so you can see which articles, or if your article gets accepted, in which journals you will need to pay for that yourself, or where it's covered by an agreement, or where the funder, so SNSF, will pay for you. So that's really the first step, which we hope will give you a lot of guidance and increase the transparency and facilitate for you to know for certain where you can get published in a way that is compliant, and knowing that you then do not necessarily need to pay for any publishing fees. So that's the first step. We also try to facilitate the second step, which is the actual submission. So we integrate with a lot of different publisher systems. Unfortunately, not all in the world. I think that will be difficult, because not all publishers even have a submission system. That sometimes submissions per email or so. But just that you know that you have the possibility in ChronosHub for some of the journals, for thousands of the journals, to directly upload your manuscript and in that way more easily make your first step on the way to a full submission. Because then you can reuse information in ChronosHub, for example, just relating it to your SNSF grant, instead of filling in all the grant details, funder details, and so forth that you need to do if you go directly to the publisher. But this is by no means a must. You can, of course, continue as you've done before to submit directly to publishers, but it becomes then a little bit trickier for us to pick the things up automatically from the publishers. So if you go through ChronosHub, it's easier for us to automate the process for you, so you have less work to do with reporting back, or for us then to, we don't need to get back to you with questions around your article. So we can do all that processing and then the payments for you. So by going through ChronosHub upon submission, where possible, it's great if you can, because as said, we can then automate all the processes downstream then after acceptance. But just for your information and a little bit more context, there are more and more publishers that then use ChronosHub directly. So even if you would go directly to a publisher like Carger, once it's released, we just started the implementation there, then you will in any case see ChronosHub, but from a different angle. So you will see a Carger branded environment on ChronosHub and not the SNSF environment. But the information can flow seamlessly between these environments. So if you then in the Carger environment have a relation to an SNSF grant from your profile, well, then that automatically appears in the SNSF environment as well. So yeah, just so you're aware, the publishers use also ChronosHub for license management and APC billing and collection and open access agreement management. And for institutions, there is also the possibility to use ChronosHub directly. That can help to reuse data from ChronosHub to automate repository deposits, so you don't need to do that. And of course, they can then do reporting and open access agreement monitoring of all articles across all publishers when they use ChronosHub. But as you see, these areas are grayed out. They are not part of the scope for the collaboration between SNSF and ChronosHub. That collaboration serves to look at only articles where there is an SNSF funding acknowledgement. And so we will try to automate those processes around ensuring compliance of all your articles or outputs from your grants, and take the burden off your shoulders regarding any payments or reimbursements and things like that. So hopefully that gives you at least a rough overview of sort of the background, the context, and where we're coming from. So I just wanted to make a brief pause there and double check if there are any questions at this time that we should look at, or if we should just proceed. Yeah, Claudia?
I think we're good to go. There are no questions in the chat so far.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, very good. So to just reiterate then a little bit on the scope of the pilot, so you know what to expect. So we have included all active SNSF grants. This is about a little bit more than 12,000 grants, I think. And there are over 40,000, I think in total 47,000 grantees. All of you should have received an invitation, but we realized that some of the email addresses we had were not current, and so we'll try to see that we get some additional sent out. So it is already now launched since June 15th. We have labeled this initial phase as a pilot. The focus is really to learn more and see how we can improve things. So that's why it's important that you send us, I'm jumping a little bit here, but that you send us any comments that you have in terms of what you like, what you dislike. If you miss something, for example, you're missing specific journals, we cannot guarantee that we have everything covered, of course, but we really, really want to make it as complete as possible. So it is a lot of a collective effort in that regard. So any input that you can provide us to help us make anything more complete or better, or serve you in a nicer way, or make things clearer, seem to the communication, or whatever it may be, then we're very, very grateful for all kinds of input, so that we can, yeah, improve on that. And then if all goes well, then this will be taken into more long-term operational collaboration. And that's where, of course, the input then will decide in what direction that will go, and how we can, yeah, potentially extend it in various ways.
Martin, I see one
Yeah.
question in the chat. The question is, the SNSF used to have OA grants related to projects, and also the possibility of applying for OA funds not related to a funded project, if that is still the case with ChronosHub. Maybe we have to specify that the collaboration with ChronosHub just touches articles, and for articles, they have always been funded if they are related to an SNSF grant. There are other ways of funding output, the books and the book chapters, and these remain unchanged. So any request for OA funding that is not with articles remains in the process that has been established so far with my SNF and the related regulations.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great with that question. Thank you very much. And the clarification, of course, Claudia. So just to explain then a little bit what we're doing in addition to what you see directly in the system. So we inform the main publishers about our collaboration, so they are aware that if there is any accepted article with an SNSF funding acknowledgement, that they should send invoices directly to us at ChronosHub. And this is really to unburden you as authors, so you don't have to do anything about that. But this is a process that takes quite some time. So we expect you to still receive invoices from quite a number of publishers also going forward during the pilot phase. And when you do, we want to lower that barrier or threshold, or what you need to do, as much as possible. So you can, of course, go into ChronosHub using your account and upload the invoice there. For, you search for the journal, and you upload the invoice in association with that. But you also have the option to directly just forward that invoice per email to snsf@chronoshub.io. So this is a very important email address that you should keep in mind, that you can use for any kind of support questions, but also forwarding, as said, invoices. And the invoices are usually, unfortunately, not completely sufficient for us to process everything. So in order for you to avoid that we get back to you with more questions, then you'll see that in the system. But we have, if you click on the link, the email link there, it sort of pre-populates an email for you, so you see what other details that we would like you to let us know about. Right. So that's hopefully a very straightforward and easy way to deal with it. And we prefer really that you send us the invoice so we can process it and ensure that everything is fine, instead of you first paying it and then asking for a reimbursement. It's still a possibility, but we really would like to avoid that, because then you may come into the unfortunate position that we conclude that you're not eligible, then you have done a payment and it's too late to change something to, for example, make it eligible. Right. And as said before, yeah, sorry.
Sorry, Martin, do we want to take already a couple of technical questions that are in the chat already now, or is that maybe the moment to show it in the live environment? There's one question on what do I do, how do I deal with a journal where it says estimated cost is 3,000 Swiss francs. This is a hybrid journal. The SNSF does not cover the fees. Maybe we can quickly give a reply on this. There has nothing changed in the policy that the SNSF only covers gold open access journals. So in this case, it seems to result that the fee for publishing in the hybrid journal has to be covered by other means. And there is no change with the switch over to ChronosHub to this policy.
Yep. Yeah, so we can have a look at that in the system as well when we have the live demo to clarify that as well. So, but as Claudia said, we haven't changed. There are no changes to the policies and what SNSF is paying for and whatnot. But it's important for us to get your input so that the wording and the communication in the system makes it really as clear as possible what the different kinds of open access means for you in terms of payment, for example. So I think, yeah, we can maybe just go through the last parts here, and then we go into the live demo, and then we'll take the additional questions that I saw popped up here just a moment ago. Yeah, all right. So as said before, it's not a must, but it is great if you do go through the journal finder when you do your submissions. Primarily when the journals are integrated, and I'll explain to you how you can see if it's integrated or not integrated. It's quite simple. The submission form is simply very short if it's not integrated. Just ask for the title, and otherwise it is integrated when we ask for more information than that. So it is also helpful that you go through ChronosHub when you do submissions, even if the journal is not integrated, because it simply puts it on our radar. We understand it's a little bit more work for you because you need to fill in that single field of article title. And then we simply take you to the login page of the journal submission system where you have to proceed and do your actual submission. But it still helps us to have your article on the radar so we can more easily also pick it up once it hopefully then gets accepted. Okay, so in this way, if you go through the journal finder when you do your submissions, then you should not need to worry about any of your articles getting non-compliant, and you would not need to do anything to take care of paying the publishing fees. Otherwise, as said, you may receive an invoice and you can just forward that to this email address with some additional details on your article. The intention is, of course, as we then have all the articles related also to your individual SNSF grants, we have the possibilities to automate the reporting back to SNSF on the outputs of your grants. That's not part of the scope of the pilot, but of course the intention is that we use this in the future. Okay. So hopefully, with that said, the scope of the pilot is somewhat clear to everyone. But as said, do not hesitate to ask any questions about that. And maybe just a last illustration to make it a little bit more visual. You as an author, you can log into ChronosHub with the account that you got activated and sent out. If you did not receive an account, then there is a request account button on the login screen. So you can request the access, and in most cases we'll simply give you that access, but we typically also check that you have an SNSF grant behind it. Librarians, for example, you can also request access, and then you get to see what the system looks like from a researcher perspective. But in any case, you can log into ChronosHub, and you can then check look up the journals that you are interested in, or you can use the journal finder in various ways. If it is integrated, said, you can make the submission directly through ChronosHub, just uploading it there, and we send it into the submission system. The submission system then sends you an email notification asking you typically to complete your submission within the submission system. But everything that you filled in ChronosHub is already then in place. And that means that upon acceptance, we don't need that much data back because we have all those structural elements in place that we need in terms of the journal and the publisher, all the authors and their affiliations, the grants and the funding details. So we can automate all the different kinds of checks that we need to do. So when we get the data back, either directly from the submission system or that you have submitted something upon acceptance into ChronosHub, as said per email, for example, then we do these number of checks for funder compliance. So we don't have any issues there. And we check funding eligibility. So it's important to understand the difference here. SNSF has a policy saying you are allowed to publish, you have to publish open access, but open access means this, or that. And some of those options mean that you have to pay for those publishing fees. So the funding eligibility is if you're eligible for SNSF to pay those publishing fees. And this is where we got this question here recently about hybrid. It's a very good and typical example. SNSF is only paying for gold open access articles, not for hybrids. And so that is one of the checks that we do. Is this journal hybrid, or is it a gold open access journal? We also check conditions with the publisher agreements because they influence the eligibility as well, and also who will cover the costs in some cases. Where possible, let's say you have opted for hybrid, so that may be compliant, but you may not have the funds to pay for it. So we can help you to find cost-efficient alternatives that are still compliant, which may be, for example, a recommendation that you take what we call the green route, so self-archiving of the full text. Once we've done these checks, and most of these checks are done automatically, if you're eligible, then we simply proceed to payment. So SNSF has money on a deposit account that we can access. We pay the publisher, and everything is fine. Your article will proceed to production and be published. So we, of course, have an mutual interest to make this as smooth and quick as possible, so that you don't have to wait for too long until your article can proceed to production. We also coordinate in cases where needed with SNSF over an approval dashboard in ChronosHub. So in cases where we're not certain, there are SNSF experts reviewing those article details when needed. What you see grayed out here is simply something, again, not part of the scope, but a possibility for institutions to access. So this is in technical terms, they have the possibility to access ChronosHub's API, so an interface to get access to their own data in a machine readable format. This only concerns articles that are accepted or published, articles that have been rejected is something that only you see. And in addition, you have the possibility to delete any rejected articles. So you do not need to feel afraid that anyone would see rejection rates or something like that for you. Okay. So I think we are principally there. So in summary, 2 use cases. Use case number 1 is pre-submission, so journal selection and manuscript submission. How does it work? You log in with the manuscript at hand. Then you can go through the list of journals. And once you've found a journal that is then compliant and you can see who's paying for it, you can select that. And once you've selected it, you upload your manuscript and you fill in the form, which is then very short. And if the journal submission system is integrated, then all that information is sent directly into that submission system. If it is not integrated, well, then this form, as said, will be just a single field, so very short, and will take you to the login page of the publisher's submission system. So that's use case number 1 up until submission. The journey continues, so everything else is exactly as you're used to in the submission system. Peer review processes and so happen as they always have with the publishers that you work with. So the journey with regards to you and SNSF and ChronosHub continues upon acceptance. Or if you did not go through ChronosHub upon submission, well, this is where your journey starts. So upon acceptance, what do you need to do? Well, if you went through ChronosHub, you don't need to do anything because then we have the data at hand. If you submit it directly to the publisher, if all goes well, you still do not need to do anything. But as said, it takes quite some time for publishers to change their processes to send invoices, for example, directly to us. So if you have received an invoice, then forward the invoice to SNSF at chronoshub.io, or you can go into the platform and upload it there. So it's hopefully quite straightforward. And yeah, this is just a comment that if it's not eligible, what will happen then? You know, we will in any case inform you about the results of those checks, and where possible, we'll guide you in a direction which will be hopefully feasible in one way or the other, ensuring compliance on the one hand side, and that you do not have to pay anything unnecessarily. Okay, so I think we're ready for the live demo. Do we want to take any of the specific questions here and now, or do we
maybe Martin, yeah, maybe we can go into the live demo, and you would show the specifically also the dashboard of each researcher with the possibility to manage submissions and also manage rejected articles, show the function that you can fully delete rejected articles so that nothing more is visible. Maybe before there was this one question: what happens, because this pilot is so far it is planned to last until mid 2022, and of course there's this interesting question: what happens with publications that are underway or that don't really fit into this specific time period? So the question goes into the direction: how would we handle the handovering back of all these publications underway back to the SNSF?
Yeah, okay, so yeah, just a quick answer on that. So in case the pilot does not proceed in any way, then we will in any case ensure that SNSF has access to all the data that is there in articles upon acceptance, so that SNSF is then taking back essentially all the administration around the checking and so. And for articles that you have submitted, but have not yet come back as accepted, so that are in the process but are sort of tracked in ChronosHub, well, these are it's probably something we will need to discuss in such case, but typically we don't need to do much with those. The only difference is because you used it to submit through to the publisher, so your article is with the publisher in any case, and SNSF is interested in continuing the journey with you upon acceptance. Yeah, we typically don't need to do too much there, I think. We can probably just leave them, but that's something we can always discuss in case that would be needed.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the URL is snsf.chronoshub.io. You find this link on all kinds of SNSF pages on the web. And this is where you log in with the email address that we sent, well, that we used when we sent the activation link to you. And the password is something that you also then can set. If you forgot your password, you can of course click the forget your password link, type in your email address, and you get a new temporary password set for you. If you, for some reason, have not received the activation link because the email address we had on you was incorrect, or it ended in your spam folder or something else, then you can request access here. Just click this button, fill in your email address, first name, last name, you select your organization or type it in. And it's great, really important that you indicate your grant number, because then we can ensure that you are related to the right grant in the system, and also that you are sort of an SNSF grantee for sure. If you are not an SNSF grantee and you still want access to the system, you can of course still fill in this form. In most cases, it won't be a problem for us to give you that access, but we'll coordinate with SNSF in cases where needed, if there for some reason should not be given the access. Okay, right. So once you filled in email address, password, you click the login button, and you end up on the sort of landing page or dashboard with just some overview or introduction. And this is where you directly can search for a journal here, but we'll get to the journal finder soon. So typically that's the starting point. But as Claudia said, just to give you that kind of overview, you see here what you can do on the platform. You can check for your journals that you are interested in submitting to and see if they are compliant with the policy, and also what conditions that apply, seen to payments and agreements and the like. As said, if you want to, it's great if you also submit your manuscript directly through ChronosHub to the publisher. Otherwise, you can, of course, also still go directly to the publisher if you prefer. Upon acceptance, you can upload your invoice, and this is where you can see this email link. So this enables you to just click that link and get an email pre-populated that you can see here. So you see that, yeah, you don't have to write that much, but in the invoice, we don't have all the details necessarily. So if anything of these things here would be missing on the invoice, then you should just simply fill that in here or paste that in. In case you've already paid your invoice, so this is not a recommendation. Recommendation is send the invoice before you pay it. Sorry, you should not pay the invoice. But if you pay the invoice and you are rather asking for reimbursement, then of course we would need your bank details so that we can do the reimbursement to you. Okay, so that is the submission per email, and of course do not forget to attach the actual invoice. And then you can of course view the published articles, and on this landing page you see an overview of your articles in the different steps of the process. So draft means you started an article in ChronosHub, but it's not yet with the publisher. Submitted articles means you have pressed the submit button and we have sent it to the publisher, or this is not an integrated journal, so we just have the title as said. And then this is then to interpret as an intended submission, but we don't know for sure that you actually went to the publisher and submitted it. But there are two cases here for submitted articles. Accepted articles is when we get it back directly from the publisher, or you have informed us, as said, through this email or uploaded it in the system. And this automatically moves over to published, from accepted to published once the publisher has published it. So we monitor your article here automatically, so you don't need to do anything there. And as Claudia said, if your article is not accepted, then you have the possibility here to, so first of all, you are the only one seeing this, not anyone else. But if you still want to be extra sure that it's not seen by anyone, you can always click here on view article. And then you see the details for your article with the manuscript attached. And you can click here to delete the article, and then it's completely out of the system and no one, not even yourselves then, can see it for sure. Right. So hopefully that's understandable and clear. But the typical starting point is the journal finder. And before we go there, just as an information, we have, as said, imported the SNSF active grants. So you should find at least one grant in your profile. This is what we use when you do the submission. So you can just link back to any of the grants you have in your profile. So if we then go to the journal finder, this is where you see that there is a little bit more than 46,000 journals right now. This evolves a bit over time. There are always actually quite a lot of movement, journals that stop publishing or new journals popping up, but even more so journals moving around between publishers and changing conditions. So we really try hard to keep everything as up to date as possible, but just that you know, we can unfortunately not, no one can, I think, guarantee that all the information is perfectly correct at all times. And hence the wish to get your input. So if you're missing a journal, for example, you can click here, cannot find your journal, and then fill in those few fields. And then we are really happy to investigate that and try to include it and get it indexed in ChronosHub. You also see when you enter the journal finder that the SNSF is selected by default. And based on SNSF's policy, you see on the right-hand side if the journal offers a compliant route or not. Right, and this is quite important. So you understand, yeah, where you can submit in a way that means that you can stay compliant. But as I said, this means there is at least one compliant route, but that also means there may be several non-compliant routes. And that's the reason why we also, upon acceptance, need to do these checks. Did you actually, as an author, take the compliant route? So we'll have a little bit more look on those aspects a little bit later. But so you see that in this list of journals, you can filter on different subject categories. This is not a perfect structure and does not include everything, of course, but it hopefully provides you with a little bit of guidance if you want to narrow down your search to see if there are any specific journals within something like history or music and chemistry or something else. You can also filter the list based on different journal lists. So if the journal is indexed in Scopus, for example, and you absolutely want to get published in a journal that is indexed in Scopus or Web of Science or DOAJ, well, then you can use these filters accordingly. Or if you have a favorite publisher, or if you're interested only in journals that offer a CC BY license. I won't go into all the details here on the different licenses. And this is also enabling you to filter out journals that cost too much, in your opinion. So you can just change the bar here. But please be aware that we don't have APC information on all journals, even though they have APCs. So if you change this from 0 to something just more than that, then you also filter out all the ones where we don't have the APC information. Okay, so if we now scroll through this list, you also see that we try to identify not only compliance, but also who will pay for this. And as said, SNSF is paying for gold open access, meaning that the journal has all their articles published open access. Whereas if you scroll down here, you see sometimes we don't know if it is gold, hybrid, or something else. So that's why you see a more generic comment or recommendation. And if we take the example here, we see that this is a hybrid journal. And so we can see here, SNSF will not cover the fees. So it is compliant, but you will need to pay this yourself if you take that route. And that's why it's important, I think, to point out that we try to explain also why is this compliant, so you can understand which route that is the way to go. So here you see that there are 3 publishing options. One is you put it behind a paywall. It's only sort of in this journal, which is a subscription journal, with no open access of your article. Well, that's not okay. Right? So that's not compliant with this SNSF's policy that you can read about down here. Green open access means self-archiving. So you put the full text in a repository, typically somewhere. But this journal has a 12-month embargo period, meaning that you cannot make it publicly available directly you have to wait for 12 months before it is publicly available in that repository. And SNSF is requiring maximum 6 months. So green open access is not an option in this case. Hybrid, on the other hand, is compliant, but as said, that's then associated with the fee that you would need to pay yourself in this case. Maybe your institution has a central APC budget and they allow hybrids. That's a possibility. Otherwise, you may have another grant from another funder and you can use that. So yeah, you have to find the money from somewhere else because SNSF will not pay for hybrids. So you may find then journals that do see where you see the green open access is an option, so you don't have to take this costly option of going hybrid. Right? So that's what we're trying to achieve and ensure. But as said, this is not always complete or always perfect. So you may not always get a complete picture, but yeah, we're trying to get that as updated as possible at all times. So apart from that, we also have included these publisher agreements. And that's essentially, for the moment, only Elsevier, Springer Nature, and Wiley. So if we filter on Wiley as a publisher, and now I didn't mention this before, so sorry about that, but we're logged in here as the author Jane Doe, belonging to the University of Zurich. And University of Zurich has opted in to, I'm not sure all of these agreements, but at least to Wiley, as it looks like here. So we can see now for the Wiley journals that the gold open access journals are not covered by this agreement, but in your case, as you have an SNSF grant, SNSF will cover those publishing fees. So that's all good. Here we see an example of a hybrid journal. As we had the case before, SNSF will not cover your fees, but as is part of an agreement, then you still do not need to pay for it because those APCs are covered by the existing agreement that your institution is having with Wiley indirectly through this national agreement. Right. Yeah,
Martin,
so hopefully,
sorry, I'm just making a little bit of the timekeeper. We've got about 10 minutes left for a couple of questions. Maybe we could round up your presentation so that we can answer some of the questions that have come up. I think one of them will be a couple of people asking that their profile is not quite up to date. Maybe grants are not added to their profile so that they would get a rough idea what they have to do if the information is not quite up to date.
Right. Yeah, so basically, if your information is not completely correct or up to date, the easiest path for you is just directly to send a message to the support. So the SNSF@chronoshub.io per email, or you see that there is a help function here as well. So when you're logged into the platform, you can just click help, and then this is pre-filled for you, and then you can ask your question, and that adds a support ticket at our end, and we'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible with whatever you then have asked for, if that is checking that your details are correct or missing grant information or what it may be. You also have access to a FAQ here for the most frequently asked questions. So you can always have a look at the FAQ here to get some guidance. There is also a brief video tutorial explaining certain aspects here, as you can see. So that's a recommendation to have a quick look there, and hopefully that can answer your most immediate questions. Okay. Any other questions?
Let me check if there are quite a couple of them also in the other question section. I think there was one specific question on how do I actually deal with the situation when I want to resubmit. Also, is SNSF in the position to track it if I resubmit an article? And a bit in the same direction, is it also possible to see that it's the same article if I change the title of the article? Maybe you can show quickly the submission or the My Article section, that people can see what they have to do if they want to resubmit.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll maybe just show that here in this way. So you can, of course, also search for journals using the keyword, and we search through primarily the title and the description and some keywords. And once you found a journal that you want to submit to, and you click the submit button, you see here that you do have the possibility to resubmit an existing article, as Claudia said. So we can pick any of these if we want to, and then that pre-populates the form. But this essentially means that this article is either in draft mode and not really used before, or it was rejected and you're resubmitting it somewhere else, right? So that is what happens if we do not track, or SNSF cannot see it. We can of course see it on the ChronosHub sort of side in the log files and so, but we do not track it in any way that would enable anyone to see that you submitted first here and then there and then there and then finally got accepted somewhere else. But this is, yeah, simply a possibility that you can use to facilitate the filling in the form, essentially, right? So if you say, I want to submit this as a new article or a new manuscript, you get to these different options, which, and the first one is sort of the most common one, of course. This is a completely new manuscript submission. But you see here that you have the possibility to enter data in ChronosHub also at later stages. So for example, you submit it directly to the publisher, and it's in review or accepted, and you want to get it into ChronosHub at this stage, because we did for some reason not pick it up. Or this is where you go if you have received the invoice and you just want to upload the invoice in the system. Then we will process it from there. And then this is just for reporting purposes if you want to have a more complete profile in ChronosHub. And this can, of course, be useful when reporting back on SNSF grant outputs. Right, so just so you know, you can enter data also much later in the process, but ideally, this is the way to go already upon submission. And that's where you get to submission form. And if you see anything more than just the title, it means that this journal is integrated. So this is where you can just select from the list like this. You can also create new grants if you have, for example, grant funding from other funders that also is behind this specific journal article. And then you fill in a few fields, but authors, you'll then be able to find your co-authors if they also are in the system. So others that have SNSF grants, as an example. And that means that instead of filling in all the details around them, well, then you just select them like this, and we have first name, last name, email address. You can also have your ORCID ID in here, organizational affiliation, and so forth. So you don't have to fill in too much information. But it's important, of course, that you ensure that you have the right corresponding author primarily indicated, because a lot about payment administration and so is related to the corresponding author and their affiliations. So it's not much here. The form depends a little bit on the journal and the submission system, but they're typically not much more extensive than this. You just select from a few lists here, and then paste in your abstract. Sometimes there's a running title, upload your file, and then save and preview. And then on the next page, you can then click to confirm your submission, and it goes into, in this case, +1.
Maybe a specific question on that, Martin. The question is, Is there a size limit for files to be uploaded? Apparently, someone is encountering difficulties with uploading a very large document.
Yeah, there may be, we have to look at that. So if there is a size limit, please judge, if you can contact the support here, as said, then they will address that issue. But the size limit should be a few hundred megabytes at least. So it needs to be a really huge file, but that can, of course, that exists, of course. So yeah, if you happen to have a very big file, then just let us know, and then we'll help you out with that.
Okay, thank you. I see also one question. The question is, when uploading a paper through ChronosHub to submit to a publisher, will it go directly to the publisher or be stored on a ChronosHub platform first? I guess this question has been answered now with showing the dashboard. So yes, it will also stay on your personal dashboard so you can see it. And depending on the integration with the publisher, it will go directly, or you will be guided to the submission page of the publisher, where you will upload it and submit it for processing by the publisher.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm scrolling a little bit through the questions. I think there's one more. The info on national agreements doesn't seem to be integrated, at least for social science journals. Is this a test phase of ChronosHub likely to be continuously improved? So yes, of course, the idea is that the people who are using the platform really report back if they're not happy with the information, maybe if it's incorrect. So we're really also hoping to improve while running through this pilot phase. So we're happy if you are not just unhappy and don't tell us, please do tell us, and then we can improve and correct the information.
Yep. So regarding the agreement information that we received, it is not as rich information as we had wished for. So there may be that certain journal titles or so have been missed because we did not always have, for example, complete lists. So that's why if you're feeling that some journal titles that should have been included in any of these 3 national agreements, so please remember it's only those 3, Elsevier, Springer Nature, and Wiley. So other agreements have not been included. If there are more national agreements, we're very happy to receive any more data. But we also concluded that in those agreements, there were also a number of journal titles that we did not have in the system. Right? So we have reached out to the corresponding publishers to try to complete the information, so we have completely correct and up-to-date matching information. So that may be a reason in this case.
We have reached 12 o'clock. I guess we could take one very last question, the one with the first submission on bioRxiv.org. For the people who have to leave, thank you very much for having joined today's webinar. There is still the possibility to ask questions to both Tobias and me, or the 3 of us, also of course to Martin from ChronosHub, if you have specific questions about the services. So for the people who have to leave, goodbye and thank you very much. Maybe we can have this one last question. What about if I want to first submit to bioRxiv, a preprint server for biology, or in parallel to submission to a journal? So I guess the question is, does that exclude each other? If you publish a preprint on that specific bioRxiv server and you also want to submit to a journal? I don't guess that there are any changes to the process as it was so far, but maybe you can comment a little bit on that more, Martin.
Yeah, no, so basically it's the same, right? If you put something on a preprint server and then you want to submit that to a journal, that's, if the journal accepts that kind of parallel publishing, then that's a completely fine to do here as well. We even work with the Center of Open Science for some of their preprint servers. So if you use PsyArchive, for example, you can put your preprint there and directly reuse that preprint and submit it through ChronosHub. It's under the hood on the preprint server into, in this case, I think it's into any of APA's journals. And then we can establish the link between the submitted paper and your preprint. But here, if you put it on another preprint server that is not integrated through ChronosHub with the journal systems, well, then we don't know about it, but you can typically just enter that information somewhere to let the publisher know. So sometimes they ask for that explicitly. If they don't, then the recommendation is to just put it actually in the abstract. So in that way, there is an information at least that there is a preprint already somewhere.
Okay, so I think we've come to the end of today's webinar. Thank you very much to all the participants. Thank you for Martin for the presentation. And as announced, the recording of today's webinar will be made available also for if you want to have a look or go and check specific answers. We are happy to take your questions also after this webinar. And thank you very much once again for joining, and have a nice day.